Welcome to In the Zone, number 48, ready to roll here. My name is Craig Zimmerman, and sitting across from me, I've got a guy that I'm going to classify as the most interesting man in the world. Chuck Grewe, welcome to In the Zone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
So Chuck, your wife is a former teacher in this East China School District.
Yes.
I know your children, your son-in-law, your grandchildren, so we're going to make this really easy and conversational.
Oh boy.
As I told you, we had crib notes from the family, so we got some of the background information.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
So Chuck, where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in the city of Detroit in the 1950s. It was a great city to grow up in, and I went to Catholic school for the first 11 years. I was the third child, the middle black sheep. And I have an older brother, older sister, two younger sisters. And my dad was a college professor at the University of Detroit. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and it was a great city to grow up in. I have nothing but fond memories growing up in Detroit.
So what Catholic school was it?
Mother of Our Savior was the grade school, 1 through 8. It was kind of a satellite grade school for St. Mary's Redford High School.
Okay.
And then we moved out in 1970 out to Royal Oak. I went to Royal Oak Kimball for my senior year.
Okay. So what cross streets were you raised on in Detroit?
Grand River and Schoolcraft.
Okay.
So
west side.
Well, I'm a west sider. My wife's an east sider.
Okay.
And usually the twain don't meet, but it worked out very well. So.
Okay. Now, there are some neighborhoods on the west side there that are still pretty nice neighborhoods. Have you been back at all?
I usually try to drive back through the old neighborhood every couple of years. Our house is still there. It's still in really nice shape, but a number of the houses from my friends, they're gone. They're no longer there, and it really breaks my heart. It's interesting because I have friends in St. Clair here, and their family's still here. Their friends are still up to a few years ago. If you wanted to find somebody, you went to their mom's house because they still lived in town. And I'm so jealous that they were able to still do that in some cases. But beautiful neighborhoods, beautiful architecture. I love architecture, the way the old homes were built, and it was great.
Now, I did some business in the west side. There's Grandmont Rosedale close to there?
Very close.
Okay.
Yep.
So, because Grandmont Rosedale is a pretty nice little enclave there.
Yeah, I had a lot of friends in Rosedale Park.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and you know, for a lot of viewers here that are watching this in Channel 6 still, when they hear Detroit today, they think of something they saw on the 6 o'clock news where everything's burned out. There are still some nice neighborhoods like Grandmont Rosedale, and I've often said, if you went down there today to Grandmont Rosedale, that area where there's some associations, and I took video pictures or took people and blindfolded them and said, where are we? They wouldn't be able to tell me that they're not, they might think Royal Oak, they might think Grosse Pointe in some cases.
Thank you, exactly.
And it's still pretty decent in some areas.
Very much so.
Obviously we know that, you know, you might go 8 blocks off the path and maybe it's not so nice, but there are some nice enclaves still down there.
Sure.
So, okay, so you grew up in the 50s, the 60s, and so did you graduate from the Catholic high school then?
No, I went to 11th grade, and then my folks moved out to Royal Oak in 1970, and I went to Royal Oak Kimball for my senior year, which was a real culture shock. I went from a Catholic school with 150 or 160 kids to, in my grade, to a public school that had 3,000 kids. I mean, the bell would ring between classes, and it was just shoulder to shoulder. And you know, in high school, it was so fun because I don't think there was anybody in my class that I couldn't have walked up to and said, "Hey, can you let me $5 until tomorrow?"
For lunch or whatever.
And they would, exactly. And you'd say, "Hey, we're going to play football at Stopel Park on Saturday," and you'd have 50, 60 people show up. It was so much fun. There were a few minor cliques there, but everybody got along still, and that was great.
Yep. So now, after high school, did you go to college?
Not immediately. I went to St. Clair County Community College, and part-time. It was tough because I was working construction, so sometimes I'd be working up towards Port Huron so I could go to school after work, and other times next month we'd get a job down near Carlton, and I would struggle to make it to classes. So I took some classes and eventually earned a bachelor or associate's degree in business from St. Clair County Community College.
Okay, and what kind of construction did you start out doing?
Well, I wanted to build my own home. That was kind of in the back of my brain, so I wanted to work construction. I worked initially underground construction, which means water main, sewer main, gas, telephone, electric. Started as a laborer, became a foreman, operated heavy equipment eventually, drove trucks, became a superintendent for a short period of time, and we had up to 60 employees, but got to do a lot of interesting things. We did tunnels, casing bores. If it involves moving dirt, we did it, so it was interesting.
Is it a company name that is still around today that anybody would recognize?
No one would recognize it. It was a smaller company, but we did a lot of underground work. They were based in Sterling Heights.
Okay.
So,
So it had dirt involved. You dealt with it.
Pretty much so. Yeah.
Okay. And then you went on to work for the road commission from there, or is there something in the middle there?
I worked for underground construction for 9 years, and then I worked with some friends I met in St. Clair as with the Boilermakers on Bell River power plants. And I started in Unit 1. I was there for a week, and then we moved over to Unit 2. And once they found out I could read blueprints, they put me in charge of laying out the bearing plates at the top of the boiler. And I did that I was there for that job. And in boiler making, you start at the top and you work your way down. And so I worked there for almost 2 years before the job was completed. And then I worked for a hydraulics firm in town, Johnson Hydraulics, and I ran lathes, Bridgeports, mills. We built hydraulic cylinders from scratch and built accumulators from scratch, repaired both of those, and hydraulic pumps. And then I'd go out and do a little troubleshooting on some different jobs and did some training for different people who needed to understand how their cylinders worked so their own people could repair them.
So you worked with Al.
Exactly.
Okay.
One of the smartest people I ever met.
Now, if I would have known that, I would have called Al to get some tidbits of information from back in the day.
Al's a very sharp guy, hardworking.
Yeah.
He knows something about everything.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the top 5 smartest people I ever met.
Okay. Now, most of this type of thing that you did with working there at the Edison plant, for example, did you just learn that on the job?
I did. I like to ask a lot of questions.
Sure.
And when I started working up on top, when laying out these boiler plates, there were like 475 plates, and the boiler is designed so that it's suspended from the ceiling. And because when it goes from cold to full operating temperature, the boiler actually grows in length 2.5 feet. So it's suspended from the ceiling by these 475 hanging rods that are anywhere from 1 inch in diameter to 3 inches in diameter. So first they build a superstructure that's about 150 by 150 by 250 feet high, and they call it the cavity. And then you start at the top with these hanging rods, and then you build your way down to the bottom, and that's how that's done. So it was fascinating to watch it work, and I ask a lot of questions, and because I like to know how things work.
Now, how long of a process would that have been? Would that have been months, weeks?
I started right after I left underground construction, and I worked there just a little over 2 years before the Unit 2 was completed, and they were starting to phase out people. I was there on a white ticket, a permit, so I wasn't a full-fledged Boilermaker, but I did it for 2 years, and it was a fascinating job, very, very interesting.
Okay. So now, if we were able to go down to the Bell River Power Plant today, that's still in operation.
Yes.
With that basic format that was set up in the early 80s, I think it was.
Yeah, absolutely, yep.
Now, do those units, do they ever get taken apart? Or is it just
they're
continuous
always undergoing, periodic repairs because of the extreme temperatures and the extreme pressures, wear and tear on the tubes that get worn out. They have to be replaced. So they still have Boilermakers and millwrights go in and making periodic repairs. Some of it is scheduled repairs and replacement, like you'd get your car in for an oil change, and some of it is, oh, hey, this got damaged last night, we better tear it down and get it fixed. So it's an ongoing process.
But the basic boilers are probably there from 1980?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Most of the structures, at least.
Okay.
So
you go from there. Where do you go from there?
Well, I finished that job. I went to work for Al. Okay. I was there for 4 years. Then I went to work for the Road Commission. I was in charge of all the equipment. We had about 600 pieces of construction equipment, 150 trucks, road graders, dump trucks, pickup trucks, cars, and I was also in charge of the building complexes when in Capac, Avoca, Marine City,
Sure.
Port Huron. We also have a dock in Marine City
Yep.
along the river. So it was my job to write specifications for new equipment, keep the equipment maintained. I had a dozen mechanics and plant maintenance people who reported to me, and also the district clerks worked for me and were under my budget as well.
What was your job title there?
Shop superintendent.
Okay. Now, I get enamored with scenarios like that whenever I travel or go someplace, because people don't care to even know about it,
Okay.
you know, but there's a lot that goes into it. Like you said, 600 pieces of equipment. Well, if you've got 600 pieces of equipment, you've got database of equipment, right? With,
Sure.
With ages, with preventative maintenance schedules.
That was the big part of the job,
mean-
was making sure that the heavy equipment was serviced every 250 hours, and to develop a replacement schedule.
Sure.
The bigger equipment, the road graders, the loaders, we replaced on an 8-year schedule, and it really worked out well. The operators, I give a lot of credit to our drivers. I didn't have the same problems that foremen had in other counties. I didn't have drivers who tore up equipment or damaged equipment. By and large, the equipment was assigned to a specific individual, and they took a lot of pride in it. They took care of it. So that was not a problem that I had to deal with. So it was just a matter of writing specifications for equipment that's going to go the distance, it's going to hold up.
Okay.
When I first started, they had a lot of problems with springs and suspension components failing because they were just under designed for the workloads that we had. And also, we started to have our own employees outfit the trucks. So we buy just a cab and chassis, and then they would design the hydraulic system, electrical system. We would buy a dump box, and our own people would mount that and mount the sander and the underbody scraper and the plow front. And again, you know, they took a lot of pride in putting this together. Also, if you're the guy who's going to run the hydraulic lines underneath this truck, you're going to route them very carefully, because if there's any point where that hydraulic line is going to rub on another line or any other component, it's going to fail. And it's always going to fail in the middle of the night when it's cold outside, and you're the guy who's going to have to go out and fix it. Guess what? You don't want to do that. So you take pride in designing it. We saved a lot of money by doing it all ourselves, and we got a much better product at the end of the day.
Now, how long have you been gone and retired from the county?
I
road
left
commission?
there in, let's see, 2002.
Okay. So in the last 20 roughly years, have things changed much with the road commission? If you talk to, say,
I keep in touch with a few people, a little different process for managing. I was very fortunate. The supervisors I had pretty much let me do what I wanted to do, and I treated it like it was my own business.
Sure.
And we had a really good rapport with the salesmen. We would buy a road grader, for example, for $104,000, and 8 years later, I had a guy who would paint them up. He was did body work on the side at home. So I would have him come in after hours. He would paint it up. Because of the state bid, I was able to buy tires pretty cheap. So I would get 6 brand new tires and put brand new tires on the grader, and we would sell them back to the manufacturers for 70 or 80 grand after 8 years, and then we would use that as a down payment. When I first hired in, we were paying about $10,000 a year in interest to pay off these loans that we had, because they didn't have the money to pay for these outright. And I paid off those loans as quickly as possible, and we were able to pay cash for all of the equipment we bought. So by doing it that way, we were able to save a lot of money and not having to pay interest. The $10,000 that we were paying in interest, we were able to buy a new pickup truck with. So in those days, you could buy one.
A lot of that equipment probably, in some cases, might have been better 25, 30 years ago than the new ones today.
In some cases, perhaps. Some of the problems you have with equipment is the electronics that we had at that time. And we had electronic equipment to apply the salt.
Yep.
The state wanted us to apply 400 pounds per mile.
Okay.
Well, when you're going faster or slower, especially in areas where there are traffic lights, when you come to a stop, if you don't have this, you've got to remember to turn it off.
Yeah.
Whereas as you sped up, it would increase the application, so that throughout the whole string of traffic lights, it was going to be applied at 400 pounds per mile. So that's good news. That's bad news. But these electrical problems, operating in an extremely harsh environment where we're using chloride as a supplement to the salt, and I called chloride liquid truck remover because it just ate them up. It was in electronics, and those systems became more and more complex.
Sure.
And complexity is the enemy of reliability. But today's equipment, by and large, is pretty well made, pretty well constructed, and we made a lot of changes to that equipment when we bought it to make it last longer in our environment.
Okay. Now, is chloride the material they use in the summertime on the dirt roads?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Chloride is a salt, and a salt has an affinity for water. And so what you do in the summertime is you apply chloride to the roads, and it absorbs any water and keeps that gravel moist, and it helps to keep down the dust. Years ago, we had mostly sand and gravel on the roads. Over a period of time, we were able to upgrade the whole county-wide system to limestone. The limestone has much better binding characteristics, and it'll stay harder. Once you get it graded smooth, it'll stay smooth for a longer period of time. The problem with limestone is that once you get potholes in the limestone, you have to be able to scrape it and cut it. And at that time we were only using through hardened blades, and which have a very high resistance to wear. But you would go through a set of blades on your road grader after 8 to 10 miles, and those are expensive. So I found a company that had these carbide inserts. There were 112 carbide inserts, and now you've got these carbide inserts you're using. And there was a gentleman named Harvey Heintzman in Marine City. He was just a great guy, and I asked him if he would be my test pilot for this, and we put him on, and I checked back with him in a couple of weeks. He said, there's no sign of wear on these inserts, and he's already got 400 miles graded. So it was so right away we determined we had to get a set of those for all of the graders.
So now with because we as motorists, we always see the trucks in the wintertime moving snow. Are those trucks probably still on an 8-year cycle, do you believe?
The trucks run a little longer cycle, just because they don't always get used all year long. So some of them, depending on seniority, might see more miles than other trucks. So that was kind of on an as-needed basis. And we needed, some tandem trucks. We needed some single-axle trucks. The single-axle trucks are much more maneuverable for doing subdivisions or exit ramps or turning around on the expressway for our applications. But the big tandems were better for the long haul. They can carry a lot more salt. They can do a lot better job in the long haul. And recently, now they have these wing blades. Some of the trucks have them on both sides. It's wonderful. That's awesome. So it's great technology.
Yeah, in some cases you only need to make one pass instead of two.
Thank you. Exactly. And in the olden days, you'd have a 12-foot underbody scraper. You do one lane. By the time you go down 5 miles and come back, the driver can't even see where he's been because traffic's going like this, and the snow gets sprayed away. And down in Macomb, you'll see them go in a series. They might have 2 or 3, but we don't have those numbers of trucks to do that. So ours got spread thinner, but with these new wings on there, really is a cat's pajamas.
Okay. I got a question in my mind that came up since I've got somebody that's done this. What about the issue of, in Michigan with our harsh winters, we use salt. Now I've heard, and I don't know what the scenario might be, but in Canada I've heard they use more sand, or up north they use more sand. Is that true, or is there?
It is true. It depends on what part of the country you're in. It's a good news, bad news. If the snow gets wet and packs down to the pavement and really gets adhered, it's tough to scrape it off when you're up north, and you just don't have that warming temperatures. Down here, salt works pretty well most of the time. If the outside temperature is 15 degrees or less, that granule of salt is just going to sit there. It's not going to work. If it's moistened with chloride, then it will start to work in that snow. Once it makes a little puddle around itself, that will start to eat the snow and start to melt the snow, and then you can get that moisture right on top of the cement so that subsequent snow will not stick to that cement. The problem is that once that snow sticks, you're not going to get it off until it gets warm again. Well, in the Upper Peninsula or over in Canada, it's not going to get warm again till July. So what you do is you put on some abrasives, and up north they have a lot of salt, so it's very inexpensive. So they need to have it in a building where it's warmed and kept dry so it doesn't stick together or freeze together. And then you put the salt down, and the darker the color of the salt, the more it will absorb the sun's rays, maybe help to start melt it, but primarily it's designed to provide some traction on the snow. So that's used on those roads. Sometimes they'll use sand on the bridges because it doesn't have any caustic attributes, or they'll use a beet juice or something else that's not going to be corrosive on the blue water bridges, for example, or on airports. They'll use similar products.
Okay. So you were at the County Road Commission, you retired from there, and you don't go and sit back in a rocking chair. What's your next career?
When I was in high school, I wanted to fly. And I got some bad advice from a high school counselor. Hey, you wear glasses. If you wear glasses, you can't fly for the military. If you don't fly for the military, you can't get a job with the airlines. Go do something else. And that's when I'll build my own house, and I wanted to work construction. So fast forward 30 years. A very good friend of mine, Gary, was a pilot at Northwest. He was a captain on the 747, and we played hockey together. In fact, we skated together this morning. And he says, I'm thinking about buying a 172 and starting a flying club. I said, well, if you're looking for partners, I'm in. And he's a shrewd guy, and he's one of the top 5 other guys I know who's so smart, him and Al. And so 4 of us went together. Gary was the only one who knew how to fly, and he was my flight instructor. And he helped me get my private, my instrument rating, my commercial certificate. He's a wonderful friend, incredibly bright, so much fun. And he never charged me a dime. He was having fun. I was having fun. But of course, he's always working on stuff. He might call me, and it's the 10th of January. Hey, I just put my outboard motor on Craigslist, and the guy wants to come and buy it today. The problem is, it's still mounted on this boat. The other problem is they've both been in salt water for 10 years. You think we can get that motor off the boat without destroying both of them in the next 2.5 hours? Because the guy's on the way to buy this motor. Yeah, bring it over. We'll get her done. And we did. And he always comes up with these great projects to work on. But eventually he said to me, he says, you might want to go back to school and get a 4-year degree. The airlines are going to be hiring. And the light went on. And it's like, oh my God, I can do this. So I went back to school age 47 and earned a Bachelor of Science in Aviation from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Their main campus is in Daytona, but they had a satellite campus at Selfridge. So I did some online classes, went to school nights and weekends, and raising 2 daughters and working full-time at the Road Commission, and just flew the wings off our little 172 and got a job offer from a company out east, Atlantic Coast Airlines. So I quit the Road Commission, went out east, got a condo out there, and I flew for 6 months, flying a Jetstream 41, 29 passengers, 2 pilots, 1 flight attendant, and I was there 6 months and got furloughed, which is airline speak for getting laid off. So it's like, okay, now what do I do? So I said, you know what, I got to continue my education. I want to do whatever I can to put something else on my resume so that I can, look better if I go to a job interview. So I went down to Texas for a couple of weeks and earned a type rating in a Boeing 737, and also earned my ATP, which is the highest level pilot certificate, airline transport pilot. And then I got, on the way home, I went through the airport in Detroit. I was talking with some guys. They said, "Hey, Pinnacle Airlines, we're hiring. We're looking for people. You should go down to Memphis and meet with our hiring lady. She's very sharp, and she'll talk to you, and maybe she can get you an interview." So I tried to take airplane flights. I could fly for free still down to Memphis. I couldn't get there. So I said, the heck with this. I just hopped in my 172 and flew it down to Memphis. And I put on a suit, rented a car, and I went to see Stephanie Grantham. And I walked in the front door unannounced, and I get talking with the gal behind the counter. "Well, Stephanie's interviewing flight attendants today." I said, "Okay, no problem." I said, "I just flew my little airplane down here from Port Huron, and I was hoping for 60 seconds of her time to give her my resume, tell her how much I want to come work for her." She said, "You were down here for something else?" I said, "No, I just 60 seconds of her time." She said, "Just a second." So she leaves and comes back with Stephanie, and she's looking at me funny, and I said,
Right.
"I just want 60 seconds of your time. Here's my resume. I would love, love, love to come fly for you." And as that 60 seconds was up, I introduced Marie, said goodbye and said thank you, shook her hand, and 2 weeks later I got a call, "Come on down for an interview." And I interviewed, and 2 weeks later I was in ground school, and the rest is history.
And what were you flying there?
It was a Bombardier CRJ 200, 50 passengers, fuselage mounted engines.
Okay.
It's got the winglets out on the wingtips, and it's a great little airplane, a lot of fun.
Now, the time from your friend saying, "Learn how to fly," to the time where you could do it commercially with your first job was what period of time?
Probably 3.5 years.
Okay.
I mean, it was busy. I mean, I was doing a lot of other things, but flying as much as I could. I needed to have over 1,000 hours, so I was flying at every chance I got. I had a map of the state of Michigan, and I divided it into like 12 different segments, and I would take off at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning. I'd flap to Traverse City, and then I'd go hit, maybe 8 or 10 airports in that one section. And it was just so much fun. Sometimes I'd use VOR navigation. Sometimes
which is what? For our viewers.
It's VORs. They're navigational aids. So
Okay.
you can tell how far you are and what radial you're on,
Okay.
and you go from point to point to point. And I use that, or I'd use the old Loran that we
Okay.
still had, which is now obsolete. Sometimes dead reckoning. You go from this point to that point, and you've got checkpoints along the way, a fixed distance, and so you check your stopwatch at each point, you check your heading, see if you're over it. So it's something you do VFR, maybe a small town, there could be a large silo, there could be a railroad track, or high tension lines that you're crossing. Sure, you're using ground references.
So visual
for your-
flight?
Exactly,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
So I used all different kinds of techniques, which was very educational for me, and checked off a lot of squares and gained a lot of experience, and off I went. It was fun.
So you're now what, early to mid 50s and flying private / commercial smaller jets?
Well, it was for a subsidiary of Northwest.
Okay.
So we were flying in and out of Detroit, and we had bases in Detroit, Minneapolis, New York, Atlanta, Memphis, Tennessee.
Regional flights?
Regional flights,
Okay.
pretty much limited to east of the Mississippi, but pretty much everywhere east of the Mississippi.
Okay.
So,
But you didn't stop there?
well, after a year and a half, I became a captain,
Okay.
and I always wanted to instruct. In fact, I was in captain school, and I already approached the instructor manager about becoming a check airman or instructor. And he says, "Chuck, you aren't even through being a passenger captain yet. You're already asking us. It's never too soon." So he said, we talked about it, what I needed to do. And as soon as I got 100 hours as a captain on the airplane, I went back to school and became a check airman instructor, which means sometimes I'll sit in the left seat and instruct new first officers, or sometimes I'll sit in the right seat and I'll instruct new captains. And I was also a ground instructor, and we would go into special airports like Helena, Montana, because it was a very unique arrival and approach into a
Mountains.
mountainous airport. So that was a special airport for us, and I would do those. And every year, a captain needs to go fly with an instructor. Sometimes I'll sit in the jump seat and just observe the captain and first officer, how they interact, make sure they're running all the appropriate checklists at the appropriate times, making sure that they're safe and following the company policies and procedures. And so it was very fun. I mean, and it's so interesting. When I first became a flight instructor, people said, "Oh, you're going to learn so much." I'm thinking, how am I supposed to learn anything?
Right.
I'm supposed to impart
Observe.
my knowledge
Right,
on
go
you. And then you sit over there and you watch people mess stuff up. It's like, I never thought of messing it up
That
like
way.
that. Or they start asking you questions. It's like, I should know this. How about if we look that up? And where would we get that information? So, I mean, it just forces you, just to study and prepare. And it keeps your nose in the books, and I love that. And in fact, I eventually invented a game called Stump the Chump. So I'm flying along with you. Okay, if you can ask me a question that I don't know the answer to, I'll buy you lunch at McDonald's. And if you ask me 5 questions I don't know the answer to, I'll buy you dinner tonight, your choice. And I tried to make it fun.
Sure.
And in fact, people I flew with regularly, they'd show up with a list. I got a list for you
ready.
this time.
They're ready.
I'm ready for you. So they got into the books. They're trying to find this obscure information. I'm learning things because they're forcing me to keep up on my game. And I loved it. I hope they enjoyed it. I bought a lot of breakfasts, but I never had to buy a dinner because I missed
good.
all 5 questions.
Okay.
But tried to make it fun.
Okay. So you're doing regional transportation, smaller jets, and at some point you go to bigger jets, correct?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well,
The different ones.
I had an opportunity to interview at Delta Airlines. And in my humble opinion, Delta is the world's premier airline, and they were known for a very tough interview. And I really didn't think I was going to get hired because of my age. At that point, I was 60 years old, and I could fly until I was 65. But if I was awake for 3 months, I was studying, and I had a stack of books like this that I read and I reread, and I had a notebook, and I would write things down. It's like that would be a really good question to ask on an interview, you know. So I pretty much filled up a whole notebook, and then at that point I began to just study my notebook. But if I was awake for 3 months, I was studying because I didn't want to give them one excuse to say no. And so eventually I had a good day, on the right day, interviewed at Delta, and I got hired. So at that time, I was the oldest pilot they'd ever hired. So I felt pretty good about that.
Okay.
A lot of fun.
And what type of routes and what were you flying at that point?
I was on the Boeing 757 and Boeing 767.
Okay.
And that's interesting because there are a number of variations. There's a 757-200, there's a 757-300, there's a 767-300, and a 767-300ER. And that being said, Delta had acquired these airplanes. Some of the 757s were acquired when they purchased Northwest, but then they also bought other airplanes from other carriers around the world. So we had no less than 14 different variations. So you're on one airplane and you reach up and move a switch.
Not there.
This airplane, that's down here. So that was interesting. So it made it challenging. But mostly we did a lot of transcons. We'd leave Detroit, maybe fly out to New York, spend the night, fly across to LA or San Fran or Seattle, spend the night, and come back to New York and back to Detroit. A lot of times we'd do a red eye, go out to, we're back and forth around the country. We did a lot of Florida flying in the wintertime, which was fun, and my wife never understood that. I said, you know, these winters really aren't that bad. She says, of course, you're in Florida 3 days a week working on your tan. Of course it's not that bad. But eventually, we did some international, mostly Europe, a lot of London, a lot of Paris. I got to know those cities very well. I would rent a motorcycle in Paris and just to expand your horizons, to get out in the countryside. And in London, there's just steeped in history, so there's so many cool things to go see. And eventually I became an instructor. They had check airmen, but you had to be a captain to be a check airman, and they were LCPs, line check pilot. I became a LVP, line validation pilot. So with Delta, you couldn't go into South America because it was a special theater unless you went with an instructor. Or you couldn't go across the North Atlantic unless you went with an instructor, or over to China or Asia. And also we had special airports here as well, Eagle, Colorado, Helena, Montana. There were a number of special airports in the U.S. because of mountainous terrain. And there were a number of special airports in South America. So if you look at the map of South America, the whole west coast is one long line of volcanoes, many of them still active.
Right.
And these are very high mountains. Some of them are 20,000 feet. And in order to get into this airport, there's only one way in. You go down this valley and there's one way out.
Right.
And we had a lot of specialized procedures. So it was my job to take crews into these special airports in South America, and it was very challenging because a lot of the pilots had been with Delta for 30 years. And they were very sharp people. A lot of these gentlemen and ladies flew in the military, some of them thousands of carrier landings, and here I am taking these guys and gals into these airports. But I was always able to show them something, teach them something that they hadn't seen before. We had this box, the FMS Flight Management System, and there were a lot of pages in there, many of which you would never use in the United States. But you get into South America and there's lots of things that you need to be doing and lots of tools in there that you can use. And I would always come up with a cheat sheet, like yours. And I would have cheat sheets for South America, and each specific airport would have its own cheat sheet, special procedures and things like that. So South America is very interesting. We might be going down to Sao Paulo, Brazil. And if you have an emergency, the airports were 1,000 miles apart. Right. So you keep track of where you are, and once you get more than 500 miles from that guy, if now we have an emergency, we're going to continue on. Some simple things like that. And over South America, you look down, and it's darker than the inside of a hat. There's no lights. There's no nothing. So that's interesting. And when you get down towards the equator, you have some really big storm systems around here. 45, 50,000 foot high storm system. That's a big storm. Down in towards the equator, they can be 60,000 plus. Oh, okay. So that's a different animal. What you're looking at on your radar in the States is different than what you'll see looking on the radar, even if it's green, which could be just moisture. In South America, you want to go around that because you're not going to get a good ride. So.
Okay. Now I've noticed, just as a layman watching things you'll see on the internet, some of these, like you say, South America or Mexico, some of these, I mean, they have, the descent into these airports is tricky because you're coming between two mountains.
Sure.
Is there one in particular that you've flown into that is tricky every time you go?
Guatemala was always interesting because it's an interesting procedure. You come in and you're at high altitude, and normally when you get below 18,000 feet, you run a checklist. And then when you get below 10,000 feet, you run a checklist. But when you're coming into airports that are at 7,000 or 8,000 feet, all of those checklists have to get done earlier. And when you're coming into Guatemala, it's a RNAV approach, basically. And you come in, you cross this fix, and then you do a teardrop turn, and you come in and you land over here. Well, you have to remain within 5 nautical miles. And that sounds like a big area, but in an airplane that's going 250 knots at that altitude, you better have the landing gear down, the flaps in your final position, on your approach speed here when you cross that fix, because otherwise when you're making this turn, you're just barely inside of that limit. And also, there were several times when you'd be coming in at night and there's a volcano over here. This red stuff's blowing out the top. It's a volcano. It's in full bloom. And fortunately, the wind is blowing that volcanic ash out to sea because that's incredibly corrosive and really hard on jet engines. Right. But then you come in and you do your approach to a landing. So that was always challenging. And some of the airports, you line up on the runway to take off, and it's like, it looks like that mountain is, 10,000 feet higher than your airport. Right. And, you don't, as soon as you take off, you can have your heading bug off to the side. And if you engage the autopilot and then you turn that bug, that's not fast enough. Okay. As soon as those wheels are up off the ground, you immediately start turning. St. Thomas was like that. St. Martin was like that. Mountains right at Eagle, Colorado. I mean, it is right there. So you got to start turning in right away.
So then, would it be correct to assume that in airports like that, it's more difficult with a bigger airplane than a smaller airplane because the speeds are increased?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And especially higher elevations, because you're going faster. Your indicated airspeed is faster, but your speed over the ground is much quicker.
Sure.
And going into like Quito, Ecuador, the original airport was at 9,000 foot elevation of the runway. Actually, I think it was 9,600. And at that time, Delta only had 6 airplanes that had the performance to get in and out of that airport.
Okay.
But then they built a new airport. It was a little bit lower, and that made it so other airplanes could get in and out much more easily.
So then, as an experienced pilot going into, say, these more extreme airports because of, say, the mountainous or the volcanoes, did you find yourself being more intensely on versus, say, Metro Detroit or Cleveland or wherever that's pretty wide open and smooth?
Detroit was easy. Pretty much, most of the time they're going to lead you around by the nose. Descend and maintain this altitude, fly this heading, cleared for the approach. And on visual days, when you can see everything, it's a walk in the park. But down in South America, it's a different animal. There are language barriers.
Sure.
Furthermore, the controllers, they know specific phraseology: climb and maintain, descend and maintain, cleared for the approach, turn right, turn left. But if you want to get into a conversation with them, all bets are off. It doesn't happen. So you have to be very careful about what you're asking and your communications. And there's usually 3 people in the cockpit. So sometimes, what did he say? I don't know. What did that guy say? And it was interesting going to Europe because the Germans spoke very good English, very easy to understand. The French were not too bad. The Brits, they were horrible because it's the King's English. They've got this. What did he say? I don't know. What did he say? Ask him again. So it was just fun, and it keeps it challenging. But like I say, in other countries, when there is a language barrier, it adds just another dimension to the whole flight experience. But that's part of it, and understanding what you're going to see. And it's a 4-hour flight, so you have time to talk about. And that was part of my job as an instructor. They're going to say this, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, then this, and listening to what they're giving the guy airplane in front of you, because you're probably going to get exactly the same thing.
Okay.
So, and also when you're flying down there, maybe keeping track of other call signs you hear on the radio. American 25. Well, that must be the guy in front of us, because we can see him on our TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system. So you might want to write down their number, American 25, because you might be talking to one controller and they say, okay, contact this controller on this frequency. You switch frequencies to check in. Nobody answers you. It's South America. So you wait, you hack the clock, you wait 5 minutes, you try again. If that doesn't work, you might call American 25 on that same frequency. Hey, we just got handed off. Just want to make sure that this is the right frequency. Oh, yeah, wait till you get past Baron Keogh fix, and you can talk, you can reach them then. Thank you very much. Sometimes the communications, it sounded like they were talking through a 10-foot pipe, because it's a very hollow sounding communication. So there are a lot of challenging aspects to going to different countries.
So now it's a mandatory retirement at 65 for airline pilots, correct?
Yes.
So you're still flying.
Sure.
Do you feel like that should change at all?
That's a double-edged sword. The younger pilots say, hey, you had your career, you could go do something else. We want to move up, I want to upgrade. For me, it was hard. I mean, I knew that was coming. So what I did was I flew as much as I could, and the instructor schedulers, they had my number. I just called them and said, hey, look, if you're looking for an instructor to take a trip, you don't have to look at my schedule and see if you have to remove a trip or if it's going to be over a weekend or over a holiday. I'm here to tell you, you don't have to call me first. You just see a trip that needs to be covered, put my name on it, and then just call me and tell me where I got to go. I mean, I'm your new best friend. So because of that, I got a lot of calls, as many as I could, and so it worked out great, and I got to do a lot of fun flying.
So then you retired from that, and you're doing a little bit of your hobby stuff, Yankee Girl.
Yes.
Explain that a little bit.
Yankee Girl Boat Works. It's I had a friend in high school who, in high school, he restored an old Chris Craft. It was a 17-footer. And when the first time I saw it, I was blown away how beautiful it was. And I always thought, well, that would be really nice. I'd like to restore an old boat like that sometime. So fast forward 20 years, and a cousin of mine who restores E-type Jaguars was at a family reunion. He said, I just bought this old wood boat. I thought I'd want to do it, but wood's a lot harder to work with for me than the cars. I said, well, what are you going to do with it? He said, I'm just going to sell it. So I asked him a few questions. It was a 1937 17-foot Chris Craft. The wood was like barn wood. It was missing most of the hardware. So I said, well, I'll come down and take a look at it. So I took Sue's dad, Charlie Wade, great guy, and we drove down to Grosse Pointe to my cousin's, and we looked at this boat. I said, well, geez, Tony, how much are you asking for this boat? He said, $500. I said, gee, Tony, I don't know. I mean, I looked at it. It had a hole in the side and everything else. I said, I don't know if I can do this. He said, look, if you promise to take me for a ride in it, I'll give you the boat. I said, that doesn't make it any easier, really. And my father-in-law says, look, let's just hook onto the trailer. We're going to head down I-94. Right. If the boat falls off the trailer on the way home, we're just going to keep going.
Driving.
And it didn't fall off and made it home. And so I spent a year restoring it. And I needed a bunch of parts, windshield brackets and a bow light for it. And I made some friends, and I bought things I didn't need to trade for things I did need, and got the boat all done. I went to my first boat show in Marine City. And it was kind of boring sitting there for 8 hours staring at my boat. But I walked down to the end. There was a gentleman named Mike Schreibner. And he's sitting on his pickup truck on his tailgate. And he had an 8x12 blue tarp on the ground, all these parts on there. So I started asking him, well, how much for that? And how much for this? How much for this? And so I'm thinking, I got one of those. I got a couple of those. So the next boat show I went to, I took a milk crate full of parts. I charged exactly half what Mike was charging. I sold everything. I said, oh, okay. Wow, yeah. So back when the Susan B. Anthony's first came out, I said, someday these are going to be worth a lot of money. So I bought $200 worth of them, put them in my safe in the basement. 20 years later, they're still worth $200. Right. So I said, I'm going to take that money. So I started going around to the old marinas. Eventually, I went to every marina in the state of Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, most of Illinois, a lot of New York. And I bought everything I could get my hands on, bought out most of the competition, including Mike Schreibner, who I met over there, and a guy out, Charlie Cross, out in Chautauqua Lake in New York, and a guy named Uncle Wayne out in, he was out in New Jersey, Lake Hopatcong. So went around, bought out the competition, most of them anyway, and found a list of all the Chris Craft dealers who existed in the 1940s and 1950s. And so I systematically called information, got their number, and I called them to see if they were still there. And if they were still there, I knew they had something that I could find and I could use. And I had a little envelope for every state. And when I was going into New York, I would check that envelope and check my contacts and go traveling. And every once in a while, I would stumble onto what I call the Rip Van Winkle Marina. You walk in the door, and it was like, this is what it looked like.
Time warp, 1940, right?
40 years ago.
Yeah.
The old metal signs, all the stuff, same thing. And it's like, oh my gosh. And there was one gentleman named Bruce Pearson who owned this marina on Lake Tippecanoe, Indiana. And he had recently passed away. His son was taking over the business, and he wanted to get rid of all this wood boat stuff. And he was going to get in some fiberglass boats. And I wound up buying an old Coca-Cola machine, a Vendo 39, which I still have, I restored, but Pepsi machines. And I bought boats, and he had these little oil cans with pictures of old runabouts on them from the 1920s and 30s. And he had drawers, and he was just, you know, you watch the TV show Pickers, I did that for 20 years. And so he just, usually I'd make a small pile and say, how much for this pile? And he'd give me a price. And sometimes they say, well, I have no idea what it's worth. So you got to lowball them then. How about 20 bucks? Well, it's worth more than that. Well, you do have an idea. So sometimes you got to do the buying and selling, but it made it fun.
Okay.
You know, I have my old grubby clothes on and I'm going through this stuff with my flashlight. And once we agree on a price, I know how the rest of the things are going to go. And I make a big pile. And I'm going through his marina, and I look over on the wall, and there's these 2x4s going up the wall. I said, that looks like a ladder. So I climb up there, get out my flashlight, and I'm looking around. There's all these wooden steering wheels. I mean, they're 18 inches in diameter. They're a walnut. They've got all of these beautiful joints. They're in great shape. The varnish is kind of bumpy because they've been in this attic for 70 years. Right. So I go back downstairs. I said, how much do you want for those steering wheels? He says, what steering wheels?
He didn't even know he
didn't know he had them.
Right.
So there were like 50 to 60 steering wheels. I bought them all. And some of them had wooden centers, some of them had aluminum centers, but it was just so much fun. It took me 3 trips to go back and get everything. And there was another one like that down in Louisville along the Ohio River, an old marina. And just different marinas I got into and just cool stuff you'd see. And I love antiques, and I love working on the old boats, and I loved buying these parts and selling them. At one time I advertised in 10 national magazines, and eventually I had to stop that because I was getting too busy. But I loved it, you know, being able to provide original, authentic parts so people can show these boats as in original condition as possible. So I love history, I love helping people do that, and it was a lot of fun. Good stuff.
Are you still doing that today?
I haven't actively gone out pursuing parts in probably 18, 20 years, once I started flying. In fact, when I started flying, Sue and I had a collection of 46 boats that I had tucked away. I mean, because they were low production numbers or one of a kind or really rare boats, and my thought was to restore them over time. But when I started flying, I realized I wasn't going to have enough time. So I sold all of those off, and now we do storage in those barns, except for this one boat that I did, 2 years ago. But yeah, I got to travel and meet a lot of really interesting people and do a lot of cool things, and that for me was a lot of fun.
Okay, for a guy that had so many things going on and just working off lists and being a pilot, you have to be very organized.
Yes.
Does your daily regiment today fill that?
I miss flying. I can't lie. I mean, it was so challenging, so fun. And when you retire, you have to have something to do.
Correct.
I mean, if you say, yeah, I want to retire, I want to go hunting and fishing, well, after about 3 weeks, I mean, so, but that being said, for me, I need to do something else. So I play hockey. Now I play hockey 5 days a week. I skate twice on Tuesday, twice on Thursday in the wintertime, and then on Sundays, ride my bicycle. And then 2 years ago, I finally got around to restoring one of these old boats. I did the first one, that 17-footer I bought from my cousin Tony, and I sold that to put up my first pole barn. And then I sold 3 boats to a very nice gentleman. He was kind of my, every time I needed to put up another building, he would show up and wanted to buy some boats, so it worked out really well. But this one boat I bought in 1988. Yeah, I found it down at the foot of Palms Road. There was a little 17-foot boat parked out front for sale. Really wasn't interested, but wanted to stop and check it out and talk to the guy. And as I'm standing there in his driveway, I look around behind his house, is like, what's that? And he said, well, he tells me the story. And as it develops, it was a boat that was used at the Walled Lake Amusement Park back in the 1950s. And there were 5 boats originally made. Eventually, I found out it was the only one that still survived. And so he said, how much do you want for that boat? Well, it's not for sale. If it was for sale, how much would you want for it? He said, well, this much. And he told me, and I gave him the money. And I always carried enough money. You never know what's going to happen.
Sure.
Yeah, there was a guy out in upstate New York who had a boat. And the one was for sale. The other one he told me about, but that one wasn't for sale. But it was super rare. So I go out there, and he also told me that he was married and had 8 kids. And so I went out there to see him, and I said, well, I get there, and I'm not interested in that boat, but how much for this boat? And he had told me in our conversation earlier about, it was like about $10,000 if he was going to sell it, but it's not for sale. So I walked into his kitchen, I put $10,000 on his counters. Wife looked at the money, she looked at him, she looked at the money, she says, yeah,
time.
so I bought the boat.
Okay.
Okay. But anyway, so I bought this boat in 1988, this from a speedboat ride operation, and brought it home. And I always knew that was one I wanted to tuck away and do because it had some historical value. So I got to start on that a couple of years ago. Hired a gentleman to give me a hand. He's a very experienced woodworker, boat worker, Ken Rosemek from Algonac, great guy. And he's really funny. He doesn't like to start much before 10 in the morning. And by 4 o'clock, he's ready for a couple of cold ones. And I love that. It was great.
That works.
And we got along really, really well. He was so fun. I learned so much from him. And the boat was a mess. So we had to replace like 18 bottom frames and had to replace the part of the stem, the 4 foot, 16 foot of the chine, about 5 foot of the keel. It was just a mess. So we got to work on every single aspect of the boat. And eventually we put a new deck on it. I was able to save most of one side. The other side was the side that they docked it on.
Oh, okay.
And who knows how many times they hit the dock.
Beat up, right.
Yeah, and there were probably 16-year-old kids who learned how to drive the boat.
Right.
They hit the dock, they hit each other.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the boat was all done. And I give Ken a lot of credit for having it turn out much better than I really thought it would look. And it came out looking really, really nice and a lot of fun.
You still have a couple left in you?
I don't know. I have one more boat that needs to be restored. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, still thinking.
Okay, we've went a long way here, and if I did not ask you about your family, I would get heckled probably for the next year.
Uh-oh.
So give us a little background with the wife and kids and grandkids.
Well, Sue was a school social worker.
Yep.
And a lot of fun. Great principals, great co-workers. We used to do a Christmas party at our house with our co-workers from Washington Elementary. It was just a neighborhood school.
Yeah.
And but we'd have 70 or 80 people in our house every year. I loved those parties and the teachers and the principal, everybody there, secretaries. They were awesome. They were such good friends. They were a true team.
Yeah.
And it was really so nice to meet all of those people and get to see them. And Sue still remains friends with many of them to this day. In fact, we're going to go to Traverse City tomorrow for a hockey tournament, and we're going to visit one of her old principals up there, so Kafka's.
Okay.
So that was a great experience, and she went back to school while we were raising kids to get her master's degree, and she did that the hard way, but she went to Western to get her undergrad degree. We have 2 daughters, Sarah and Chris Andra. And Chris is married to Jonathan, who's just a wonderful guy. They have 2 boys, and they're so much fun. And I'm always trying to teach them how to do things. And and I say, we have to be careful with this because my name is Safety Chuck. And they say, you're not Safety Chuck, you're Dangerous Chuck. Look at all those scars on your arms. I can't really argue with these guys. They're so smart and they're so fast.
Yep.
And I can't even catch them anymore. But they just come over and it warms your heart to spend time with the little guys. They're so much fun.
Good to hear.
And our daughter Sarah does everything. She's always working 3-4 different jobs. She's a school teacher, high school math and science, and she does closings for mortgages, and she just recently got a job with National Geographic as a scuba diver.
I heard that, yeah.
Which is really,
Yeah.
really cool. So, and she's so disciplined. She's got a great eye underwater. We've traveled with Sarah. Sue and I are all, and Sarah all scuba dive, and we've been all over the planet scuba diving. And Sarah's just so easy to get along with, and she sees so much, and she's just really sharp and really good diver and always looking out for Sue. We tell Sue she's a lot of work to get in the water, but when she's in the water, she's a much better diver than I am.
You gonna get Jonathan down under the water?
That's never going to happen. Yeah. Although we do have taught the boys how to snorkel
Okay.
and swim, and so I love seeing them gain confidence in the water.
So you can't get Jonathan below the water or above by the clouds either, right? Like,
Not so far.
Not so
No,
far.
Maybe in the future.
well, thanks for coming in, Chuck. Number 48's in the books here. I feel like we're going to have a version 2 coming up maybe this summer, this winter, because there's
Okay.
enough things that I know in the background we can talk about.
You covered a lot of material today.
Yeah.
You did a very nice
So,
job.
thank you for coming.
Thank you, sir.
Watch Channel 6, CTV 6. You see the phone number there, 586-707-5811. If you find an interesting character like Chuck or somebody else, let me know. We'll be happy to put them on. Have a great day.